A billionaire robbed of the chance to be a father. A struggling student, pregnant, with no idea how. Their worlds were never meant to collide, but fate had other plans. This is a story of broken trust, impossible choices, and a connection no one saw coming. Before we dive deep into this emotional roller coaster, don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's begin. Leonard Thompson was the brilliant young CEO of a rising tech empire, one that had quickly become a household name in innovation and luxury. At just 37, he had built an empire from scratch, and while his name echoed in boardrooms and headlines, one thing weighed heavily on his mind: legacy. He was an only child, raised by parents who sacrificed everything to give him a future. For Leonard, continuing the bloodline wasn't just a desire, it was a responsibility. But the one person he wanted to build a family with, his wife Linda, had different dreams. Linda was a successful international model, gracing the covers of fashion magazines and walking the runways of Milan and Paris. Her career was at its peak, and so was the pressure to remain flawless. Pregnancy, she feared, would reshape her body and dim the spotlight she had worked so hard to stand in. Many nights, they'd sit in their penthouse overlooking the city lights, and she would gently bring up the idea of adoption. "There are children who already need love," she'd say softly. But Leonard would shake his head. "I want a child that carries my name, my blood. It's not just about parenting, it's about preserving everything my parents built into me." Their quiet disagreements simmered beneath the surface, never turning into a fight, but never really going away either. Then came the unexpected blow. Leonard was diagnosed with cancer, a rare but treatable form. The shock rattled their world. And while he fought it with every ounce of strength, the doctors gave him a warning: treatment could render him infertile. Not one to give up hope, Leonard took a precaution. He left a sperm sample at the hospital, just in case fate allowed him another chance. Miraculously, he recovered. The cancer receded. Life slowly resumed its rhythm. But the reality of what had been lost lingered. Leonard still longed for a child of his own, and Linda, moved by everything they'd survived, offered a new solution: surrogacy. This time, Leonard agreed. They both wanted a family, and this would let them build it together. They found a trusted hospital, selected an egg donor, and began the process. Through it all, Leonard held Linda's hand tightly. Despite their differences and detours, they had arrived at a path they both could walk, towards a future, a family, and a legacy born of love. The hospital was unusually hectic that morning. Nurses scrambled down the hallways, and doctors juggled a backlog of patients due to a staffing reshuffle. Dr. Max, the head of fertility procedures, was overwhelmed. He had promised to personally oversee Morgan Rivers' appointment. She had booked it 2 days prior, complaining of prolonged fatigue and unusual symptoms. But as pressure mounted, he quickly asked one of the junior doctors to handle her case instead. It was a rushed decision, one he would come to regret. That moment of haste became the spark for a disaster. In the blur of appointments, samples, and names on the charts, the junior doctor mixed up files. Morgan Rivers, a hardworking IT student, was inseminated with Leonard Thompson's preserved sperm, an error meant for a surrogate under a completely different program. It wasn't until the end of the day, when Dr. Max reviewed the reports, that he realized what had happened. Panic struck. If this ever came to light, it would destroy reputations and possibly shut down the entire department. Instead of confronting the mess, the hospital administrators quietly deleted Morgan's record from the logs and agreed to keep everything buried. Meanwhile, Leonard Thompson received a call that changed everything. The procedure had been declared a success. He was going to be a father. Overcome with joy, he rushed to tell Linda, who smiled and hugged him tightly. But deep inside, her heart wasn't dancing like his. She had agreed to this for the sake of their marriage, for love, but the idea of a child not carried in her own body stirred fears she couldn't silence. Still, This was the path they had chosen, and for now, she chose to walk it with him. Back in the city, Morgan was just finishing her evening shift, cleaning an office building. The hospital had called earlier, asking her to stop by for her results. She changed quickly and made her way there, exhausted but curious. When she arrived, a nurse welcomed her with a warm, congratulatory smile. "Your test results are in, Miss Rivers." "Congratulations. You're pregnant." Morgan blinked, then laughed nervously. "That can't be right," she said. "I'm a virgin. Maybe you mixed me up with someone else." The nurse tried to reassure her, but the words barely registered. Feeling lightheaded, Morgan hurried out, her mind spinning. She didn't believe a word of it. She stopped at a small pharmacy, bought a pregnancy test, and made her way to a nearby office complex she often passed on her way home. Slipping into the restroom, she locked the door and shakily unwrapped the kit. Her hands trembled as she waited. And then, 2 red lines. Clear. Undeniable. The test dropped from her fingers. Her back hit the wall as she slid to the floor, heart pounding, breath ragged. "No. No. This can't be," she whispered. But it was. How could this be true? She had never been with anyone. A few days later, Leonard Thompson received a call that shook the very foundation of his dreams. The hospital delivered the devastating news. The surrogate chosen to carry his child had suffered severe complications. The pregnancy couldn't be sustained. In an instant, every ounce of hope he had clung to vanished. The thought of holding his own child, of passing down his name, dissolved before his eyes. He was crushed. He canceled all appointments. Board meetings were postponed, urgent calls left unanswered. His phone rang again and again. Linda was calling, but he couldn't bring himself to pick up. A storm brewed inside him, not just grief, but quiet resentment. If only she had agreed earlier, if she hadn't clung so tightly to her modeling career, maybe they wouldn't be here. Maybe they'd already have the child he now mourned. That thought lingered like a wound that refused to close. Desperate to breathe, Leonard left the office that evening. Music blasted from his car stereo as he drove aimlessly through the city lights. He had stopped briefly at a lounge to drink away his thoughts, and now, slightly unsteady and emotionally drained, he pushed the car a little too fast down the nearly empty road. Morgan Rivers was just finishing her night shift, wiping down the last desk in the office she cleaned. Her eyes were heavy, her steps slower than usual. But her mind? It raced. She was carrying a child she never consented to, and no one in her world knew, not even her roommates. The question echoed louder each day. Should she keep the baby or erase this nightmare before it grew? She crossed the street, her head down, thoughts tangled, when the sound of tires skidding jolted her. A black car came to a sharp stop inches away. Her breath caught in her throat. "Are you blind?" she cried, heart pounding as she stepped back, eyes wide. Leonard flung the door open, his voice low but urgent. "I'm sorry, are you all right? I didn't see you." His tone was sincere, but his eyes were tired, glassy from emotion and exhaustion. Their eyes locked for a brief second, his filled with sorrow, hers with confusion. Morgan clutched her bag tighter, her lips trembling. "Just watch where you're going," she mumbled, stepping away. 2 strangers, 2 worlds, both walking through pain they couldn't share. But in that fleeting moment, something passed between them, an invisible thread neither of them could explain. As soon as Morgan stepped into the small dorm apartment, Maria was already waiting, arms crossed, worry written all over her face. "You can't keep this to yourself, Morgan," she said firmly. "You have to talk to someone. Let them help you make sense of this." Morgan sighed, dropping her bag on the chair and collapsing onto the bed. Maria meant well, but she didn't understand what it felt like. No one would believe her, especially not her mother, Loretta. The very thought of facing her mother sent a chill through Morgan's spine. Loretta, a woman hardened by years of trauma, had built her life around mistrust, especially toward men. Her past was a painful one, marked by the torment she endured at the hands of her own father. At just 12, she had experienced cruelty no child should know, and those memories had never left her. Instead, they shaped her. In the arms of a woman named Sarah, Loretta had found the peace she thought she'd never feel again. Together, they raised Morgan in a home full of strength and silence, where questions about the past were quietly buried. Morgan had always known her family was different. She was conceived through a sperm donor, something her mothers never spoke much about. Her biological father was a faceless name in a file, someone who had made her existence possible but played no part in her life. To her, he was a ghost. But now, faced with the possibility of becoming a mother herself through a situation she didn't ask for, that mystery weighed heavier than ever. But Morgan's current reality threatened to unearth all those buried emotions. She was terrified. Telling Loretta meant exposing a truth that sounded like a lie. How do you explain being pregnant when you've never been with anyone? Her chest tightened at the thought. The fallout could be unbearable. Loretta would never believe it. She would assume the worst, that Morgan had opened her legs to a man despite all her warnings. She had raised Morgan to be cautious, to stay away from men, to never repeat the cycle of pain she had endured. But this would feel like betrayal. Then there was Uncle Simpson. His own story had been another chapter of the family's ongoing tragedy. Once a hopeful man, his life had spiraled after his wife accused him of cheating and vanished with another man, leaving him with 2 children and a shattered home. The accusations were baseless, sparked by insecurity and manipulation, and by the time the truth surfaced, it was too late. He now survived on church support, raising his kids with a quiet dignity, the pain of betrayal etched into his tired face. Morgan sat silently, overwhelmed by the chaos surrounding her life. Her family had survived too much already, and now she was caught in something she couldn't explain, trapped between fear and the truth she wasn't ready to face. That night, Morgan sat alone on her bed, phone in hand, the screen dimly lighting her face. Her fingers hovered over the call button, trembling. After a long pause, she finally pressed it. The line rang once, then twice, before crackling to life. "Morgan? Is everything all right? You sound strange." Loretta's voice came through, calm but tinged with worry. Morgan swallowed hard. "Mama, I need to talk to you. All of you. It's serious." There was a pause on the other end. Loretta could hear the tension in her daughter's voice, the kind that only came when something life-altering had happened. "All right. Come home tomorrow morning. I'll have Sarah and Uncle Simpson there too." By morning, Morgan was seated in the modest living room of her childhood home, the same space that once echoed with her laughter and bedtime stories. Now, it felt heavier, almost like the walls were listening. She sat between her mothers on the couch, Sarah's hand resting gently on her shoulder. Across from them, Uncle Simpson sat quietly, his 2 children playing in the corner, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. Morgan took a deep breath, her palms sweaty. "I'm pregnant," she said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Loretta's head snapped toward her. "Pregnant?" Her voice shot through the room like a whip. "With whose child? Who's the man that did this to you?" Her face contorted with rage and fear. "Were you raped, Morgan? Tell me now." Morgan shook her head frantically, eyes wide. "No, Mama. No one touched me. I've never been with anyone." I swear Sarah's eyes widened, her hand dropping from Morgan's shoulder. "What do you mean? That's not possible. Morgan, this doesn't make any sense." "I've been trying to figure it out," Morgan said, her voice shaking. "I went to the hospital because I was feeling sick, and somehow they told me I was pregnant. But I didn't agree to anything like that. I think something went wrong there. A mistake." Simpson leaned forward, confusion written all over his scarred face. "A mistake? What kind of mistake results in a pregnancy?" Morgan wiped her tears, looking from one stunned face to the next. "I don't have all the answers, but I know I didn't do anything. I'm telling the truth." Loretta stood up, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Her mind raced back to her past, to the betrayal, the helplessness, the nights she cried herself to sleep. "Do you know what I went through to protect you from this world? From men? And now you're telling me you're pregnant and you don't know how?" "I know it sounds impossible," Morgan whispered, voice hoarse. "But please, just believe me." The room stayed still. 3 adults, each with their own scars and memories, sat trying to process what they had just heard. And in the middle of it all sat Morgan, afraid, confused, and desperately needing someone to trust her. Sarah reached for Loretta's hand, her tone calm and steady. "Loretta, please. Let's take a moment and think this through clearly." But Loretta couldn't hear reason. Her thoughts spiraled into a deep place of despair. "This family, it's like we're cursed," she said, her voice trembling. "My own mother was destroyed by the man she married. I was just 12 when I was abused by my own father. That nightmare ruined everything. That's why I chose a different path. I married a woman thinking maybe, just maybe, I could break that cycle. And now, look at where we are again. Surrounded by shame, confusion, and heartbreak." Uncle Simpson's voice broke through the tension, low but steady. "Loretta, this isn't about curses. This is about Morgan. She needs us right now. We can't fall apart on her. We need to find a way forward, together." Morgan turned to look at her uncle, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and silent appreciation. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't even know where to begin." Her mind echoed with Maria's words. "You have to tell them, Morgan." She had done that. But now what? The room pulsed with raw emotions, anger, fear, uncertainty, and love, colliding all at once. Morgan moved back into the home she grew up in, hoping the people she trusted most could guide her through the darkness. The origin of her pregnancy remained a painful mystery, but Loretta and Sarah were now determined to uncover the truth behind it, no matter how difficult the answers might be. The tension in the room had been building for days, but that evening, it finally cracked. Linda stood in front of Leonard, arms folded, voice sharp with frustration. "You've been so distant lately, Leonard. Do you even see me anymore? Is this all my fault now?" Her tone was defensive, more irritated than remorseful. "I know things didn't go as planned, but you're not the only one hurting here. I'm your wife, not the enemy." Leonard looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. But then the pain rose, slicing through every word he had tried to swallow. "Really, Linda," he said, voice low but full of years of pent-up resentment. "You refused me children. You turned your back on the one thing I longed for. And now I can't even have one. Anywhere, with anyone. You've reduced me to a man who has nothing to pass on. Nothing. Is this the reward I get for choosing you? For loving you?" Linda's face stayed still. She blinked, then rolled her eyes, brushing past him like his words didn't sting. But they did. She just didn't know how to admit it. When she stepped out of the room, it wasn't tears she shed, but pride she clung to. Later that day, desperate for someone to back her, Linda went straight to Florence's place, her closest friend, the one who had always taken her side no matter what. "Can you believe the nerve?" Linda snapped as she paced the room. "He blames me for everything, like I'm some villain for not wanting my body ruined. Like I owe him a child just because he wants one." But Florence didn't respond the way Linda expected. She stayed quiet for a beat, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "Linda, babe, you really messed up this time. Leonard's a good man. He's never looked at another woman. He supported your career, kept every vow, and all he asked for was a child. One child. You didn't even try." The words hit like a slap. Linda stared at her friend, eyes narrowing. "So you're on his side now?" she snapped. "You too?" "I'm on the side of truth," Florence replied, her voice gentle but unshaken. "And the truth is, he deserves happiness, Linda. He's given you everything." Linda scoffed, grabbing her bag and heading toward the door, muttering curses under her breath. But before she could storm out, Florence called out one last time, her words hanging in the air like a question wrapped in warning. "What if one day you find out Leonard has a child somewhere else?" Linda stopped cold. Her fingers tightened on the door handle. She turned her head slightly, eyes locking with Florence's. "He wouldn't," she said, though her voice held a flicker of uncertainty. Florence didn't say another word. She didn't have to. And with that, Linda walked out, not in guilt, not in grief, but in denial. To clear his mind, Leonard Thompson left the house that evening with no destination in mind. The silence between him and Linda had grown too heavy to bear, and every wall in their home felt like it was pressing in on him. He drove aimlessly until the city lights faded into the shadows of the park. The air was cool, the breeze carrying just enough calm to soothe his restless spirit. Parking his car quietly, he stepped onto the winding path, hands buried deep in his pockets, eyes distant. He eventually reached a wooden bench tucked under a large tree and sat without thinking, needing the stillness more than anything. A few feet away, someone else was already seated, a young woman hunched over with her head in her hands, oblivious to the world around her. She hadn't even noticed his presence. She seemed lost, both physically and emotionally. After a long pause, Leonard's voice gently broke the silence. "Are you okay?" Morgan Rivers jumped slightly, startled by the voice, her thoughts snapping back to reality. She hadn't realized someone was beside her. Wiping her cheek discreetly, she nodded slowly, unsure whether to answer or walk away. But there was something about the calm in his tone, something sincere. "Not really," she finally said, eyes still fixed on the grass in front of her. "It's been a really confusing time." Leonard turned slightly to face her but said nothing, letting the silence encourage her to go on if she wanted. And she did. "I'm pregnant," Morgan whispered, the words barely leaving her lips. "But I don't even know how. I didn't ask for this. I didn't do anything. My parents, they think I'm lying, that I've done something shameful. My mom, she's furious. I'm supposed to stop school and just figure things out." She chuckled bitterly, brushing away a tear. "They think I'm a disappointment. I don't even know how to convince them I didn't choose this." Leonard's brow furrowed. He wasn't expecting that. She looked so young, so overwhelmed. "You don't want the child?" he asked, not judging, just trying to understand. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "Part of me wants to make it all disappear, but part of me is scared of what that would mean. I didn't plan for this." He sat quietly for a moment, absorbing her words. "And here I am," he said softly, "praying for a child, just one, trying everything, giving up everything, and still nothing." Morgan turned slightly, finally meeting his eyes. There was no pity there, just empathy, mutual confusion, mutual exhaustion. "Life is weird like that," she murmured. Leonard gave a faint nod. "It is. Sometimes it gives what we're not ready for, and withholds what we're desperate for." They talked for a while longer, about pain, about pressure, about feeling alone even when surrounded by people. They didn't share the full truth, just enough to find comfort in knowing someone else was carrying something heavy too. They never exchanged names, never asked for contacts. It wasn't about that. For that one evening, they were simply two souls who found each other in the middle of a storm, holding on to the peace that came from being understood. As night fell, they stood and parted ways, strangers still, yet no longer entirely alone. Neither of them realized just how significant their encounter would become. But fate wasn't done with them. What happens when the truth finally unravels and the child they never expected becomes the bond they can't escape?